I left the office a little after 10. The building had that familiar hum of a place that's technically still alive but feels long dead. Motion sensors flicking lights on and off as I passed through, the elevator groaning like it hated moving this late. The kind of silence that doesn't comfort, just makes your own footsteps feel like an intrusion. I was exhausted, dead on my feet, the kind of tired that wraps around your bones. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few scattered vehicles under flickering lights. I tossed my bag into the passenger seat, sat for a second with my hands on the wheel, and exhaled. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Just one more late night. Just another long drive home. The city thinned out fast, buildings giving way to neighborhoods, then neighborhoods to wide roads and broken fences. My commute wasn't long, but the stretch between work and home had this stretch of two-lane road that always felt like the world forgot about it. Not rural, not quite suburban, just empty. Trees pressed close to the road in some places, too close, like they were leaning in to listen. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed the car behind me. It was a black sedan, older model, nothing special. I wouldn't have given it a second glance if it hadn't been for two things. Its headlights weren't on, and it was close. Not tailgating, but hovering, keeping just enough distance to avoid suspicion, but not enough to ignore. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe their lights were faulty. Maybe they didn't realize. People get lazy, forgetful, weird at night. I changed lanes. The car did too. I slowed down, tapping the brakes a little. It followed suit. No change in distance. No attempt to pass. I turned off onto a side road I never used, just to be sure. It was one of those loops that feeds right back into the main road, a shortcut no one bothers with because of the potholes. The sedan followed. Still no headlights. That was when my hands started sweating. Just a little at first. A dampness on the wheel. I checked the rear view again. The car kept pace. Always 2 car lengths back, like it was tethered to me. I took another turn, then another, creating a zigzag pattern that made no sense for someone headed in the same direction. There was no other traffic now. Not this late. The streets were bathed in that amber glow from old sodium lights, casting the trees in weird, flickering shadows. Everything looked like it was breathing. I pulled over on the shoulder and stepped out casually, pretending to check something on my back tire. The car slowed too, then stopped. A little farther back this time, but still facing me. No movement from inside. I couldn't make out the driver through the windshield. Too dark. I stood there longer than I needed to, pretending to stretch. When I finally got back in the car and pulled off, the sedan resumed following. I could feel my pulse in my teeth. The radio was off. I hadn't even noticed until then. I usually listen to podcasts or something to stay awake, but I didn't remember turning it off. The silence felt like a second presence in the car. The neighborhood ahead was familiar, closer to home, but still a few turns out. I passed a convenience store, its lights dimmed for the night. A closed diner. A gas station with pumps that hadn't worked in years. I sped up. So did the car. I stopped at a light, even though no one was coming. So did it. Still no headlights. A thought crept in that I couldn't shake. What if it didn't have a driver? My fingers clenched the wheel tighter. I took a sudden left. A wide turn into a long avenue that led to the local police station. It wasn't far, maybe 5 minutes from where I was. My eyes darted to the mirror again. Still there. Same car. Same distance. Same dark, expressionless shell gliding silently behind me. The moment I turned into the police station parking lot, everything changed. I pulled in fast, almost too fast, the tires crunching over loose gravel. I glanced up at the rearview mirror, already expecting to see the black car following in behind me. There was nothing. The road behind me was empty. No tiriskelet. No engine revved. No vanishing blur of movement. It just wasn't there. 1 second it was behind me. The next gone. I stared down the road, my chest tight. The quiet was even worse now, like the silence had weight. The parking lot lights buzzed overhead, casting cold light onto my dashboard. I sat still, gripping the steering wheel like I was still moving. Like if I let go, everything would catch up. Eventually, I stepped out and walked up to the front entrance of the station. The lobby lights were still on, a bored-looking desk officer shuffling paperwork inside. I didn't know what I was going to say. What could I say? That an old car followed me, with no lights, then vanished without a trace? That it didn't try to hurt me, or approach me, or do anything except mirror me until it didn't? I stood there for a long minute, not ready to go in, not ready to go home either. Just listening to the silence, watching the road, waiting for the car to come back. It never did, but I never saw it leave either. I sat in the fluorescent-drenched lobby of the police station, my knees bouncing, my thoughts moving in a dozen directions at once. The wall clock ticked in slow motion, a second hand clawing its way around like it was fighting gravity. I kept expecting the black sedan to roll back into view through the front windows, headlights still dark, engine still silent. But outside, the street remained empty. Just wind dragging trash along the curb and the occasional flicker of a faulty streetlight. Inside, everything felt unnaturally still. A receptionist tapped idly at a keyboard, not looking at me. The air carried that faint institutional sterility, bleach and coffee and something older, more metallic. I clutched my phone in one hand, though it didn't feel like it would help. Not if whatever happened tonight had any logic to it. And it didn't. When I first told the officer about the car, I could see the polite skepticism creep over his face. Not cruel, just default disbelief. A tired, knowing glance exchanged with the other officer nearby. I could almost hear the assumptions forming behind their eyes. Working late, maybe stressed, maybe overtired. Maybe I'd just seen shadows where there weren't any. Still, one of them humored me. Asked if I got the license plate. I had. I wasn't sure how, but I had. It was a short sequence. Just a few letters and numbers. Something about it stuck with me the second I saw it. Like it belonged to a word I should know, a name buried somewhere in the dark of my memory. He took the slip of paper without comment, disappeared behind a door labeled records. I waited and waited. When the door opened again, I knew something had shifted. The man who came out wasn't the same casual, disbelieving cop who took my note. His posture had stiffened. The edges of his expression were pulled tight. He didn't sit down. He didn't even approach the desk. He stood in the doorway for a second, holding the paper like it had turned hot in his hands. The words he spoke were measured, careful. I didn't need to hear them again to remember them. They wrote themselves across the inside of my skull. The car, my car, had been impounded in 1983. It was part of a fatal accident on a rural road outside of town. The driver lost control during a storm and slammed into a tree at high speed. No passengers, no survivors. The man inside had died on impact. His name was Carl Reeves. I must have asked something in response, something to bridge the gap between fact and possibility, but I don't remember what. I just remember the sound of the officer's voice dropping when he added the last part. No reports of theft, ever. The car was crushed and stored in an off-site impound facility for years before being auctioned for scrap. No record of it ever being registered again. It shouldn't exist. Not anymore. Carl Reeves. The name turned to ice in my bloodstream. I hadn't thought of him in years. Decades, maybe. It was a name I heard once, in passing, and then never again. One of those family secrets that hangs in the air, even if it's never spoken. My mother had been young, barely out of high school, when she dated a man named Carl. She never told me much, just enough to make it clear she didn't want to talk about him, that he'd left, that she was better off without him. I'd filled in the blanks on my own over time. He was the before. She was the after. I'd always assumed he left town. Maybe joined the military. Maybe ran off with someone else. It didn't matter. He was gone before I was born. And from the way my mother would change the subject, from the flatness in her eyes, every time his name came up, I never had a reason to press. Now I had one. The car that followed me was the same model, same color, same plate. The same car. The one he died in. The one they said had been totaled. The officer asked if I wanted someone to escort me home. He tried to be gentle about it, not quite suggesting that I imagined the whole thing, but not fully believing me either. He didn't know how to square what the record said with what I described. I declined. I wasn't ready to leave, but I didn't want to be followed anymore by headlights or police chatter or eyes I couldn't see. I stepped outside, and for a long time I just stood there, breathing in the cool air, letting it sting my lungs. It smelled faintly of wet pavement and something else, something sour and electrical. The wind had picked up. Leaves skittered across the sidewalk like insects. I glanced down the street again. Still empty. Back in my car, I locked the doors before I even turned the ignition. Habit, or reflex, or fear, I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't play music on the way home. I didn't need more noise. Just the hum of the engine, the occasional crunch of gravel, and the rhythmic bump of my tires over the seams in the road. When I got home, I parked beneath the floodlight in my driveway. I sat there for several minutes, watching the mirror, just in case. But nothing came. No engine rumble. No twin glows of low-sitting headlights. Still, I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I laid in bed with the covers drawn up tight, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house creak with the wind. I kept replaying the details of the impound record, of the name, of my mother's face when I'd once, foolishly, asked about Carl. And something else kept bothering me, something small but sharp. I kept thinking about the license plate. Not just the numbers, but the shape of the letters. The fading paint, the bent corner. I remember it too well, because I'd seen that plate before. Not tonight, not even this week. Years ago, in a photograph. A grainy, overexposed picture tucked into an old photo album my mom used to keep in a cardboard box under the bed. I wasn't supposed to go through it, but I had once, looking for something else. That plate was in the background, half visible behind two people standing in front of a diner. One of them was my mother. The other was a man I didn't recognize. But I did now. Carl Reeves, the man who was supposed to be dead, in the car that shouldn't have followed me. Sleep didn't come easily after the station visit. When it did, it was fractured, oily, the kind that left a residue even after waking. It was like dipping below the surface of something cold and viscous, only to shoot back up again gasping, heart hammering. The dreams had started the same night I learned his name. They weren't terrifying in the traditional sense. No monsters, no screaming. Just roads. Always roads. Empty, dark highways lit only by the pale sweep of my headlights. The white dashes in the center line stretching endlessly, hypnotic. And the hum of tires, a sound that should have soothed but somehow didn't. It was the sameness of it that made it unbearable. The sense of being stuck in a loop. The feeling that I'd driven the same stretch of road 1,000 times before, but never remembered where it led. In every dream, I was alone, until I wasn't. It happened subtly at first. A chill that crept up my spine despite the windows being closed. A weight on the car that shouldn't be there, like the suspension was bearing more than just my own weight. Then, in the mirror, at first just a shape. A suggestion, something not quite part of the upholstery. But night after night, it became clearer. Someone in the back seat. I couldn't turn to see them. Every time I tried, my neck stiffened like something inside me refused. All I had was the mirror. In that sliver of silver, I'd catch a glimpse, a silhouette, a reflection of an unmoving face, eyes like empty wells. Not glowing, not dramatic, just wrong. Human in all the ways that should have been reassuring, and yet stripped of anything familiar. The kind of face your brain doesn't want to catalog. The kind you forget as soon as you look away, but never truly stop seeing. I woke every morning with the same image lingering like smoke. The rearview mirror, my face in it, and just behind mine, something else. Eventually, I stopped sleeping entirely. 2, 3 nights of maybe an hour at a time, and even that was slipping. Coffee couldn't keep up. My hands trembled when I turned keys, signed receipts, picked up my phone. I found myself checking my back seat constantly, sometimes more than once before pulling out of the driveway. Never anything there. Nothing but the impression of warmth where no one should have sat. It was sometime around dawn on the 4th day when I remembered the dash cam. I hadn't even meant to buy it. It came bundled with a GPS system I ordered online. I'd installed it months ago, set it to loop recording, and promptly forgot it existed. But now, it was the only thing I trusted more than my memory. Maybe it had caught something I missed. I pulled the micro SD card from the camera and slotted it into my laptop. The files were sorted by date, hours upon hours of footage. Most of it was useless, just footage of me going to work, coming home, sitting at red lights, parking in grocery store lots. Until it wasn't. I scrubbed through the file from the night I'd driven to the police station. The footage showed the black car following me, just like I remembered. But something about the way it followed was off. It kept its distance too perfectly. It never wavered, never adjusted. The gaps between our cars were identical, frame to frame, like it wasn't reacting but replaying. I paused at a turn I made at an intersection, one I only took to lose the car. In the footage, the sedan wasn't behind me. Not at first. I could see it in the corner of the frame, idling behind a dumpster across the street before pulling out. It hadn't followed me there. It had been waiting. Further along, I slowed the playback. Just a random residential block. The car wasn't behind me at all, but in the left of the frame, partially obscured by hedges, half hidden behind a tree that should have been too narrow to conceal it. Yet somehow it was there. I scanned another clip, a gas station reflection in the mirror above my head. The angle showed my car, stationary at a pump, and across the lot, near the car wash, black paint, same model, same shape. Lights off, no movement. Another file, an intersection I didn't remember crossing. I paused. I never took that route. Not once. But there I was. The timestamp matched the time I should have been sleeping. The car followed me in that footage too. No headlights, no noise. Just a phantom pressed against reality, closer than it should be. I froze the footage on one frame. My car sat in the center of the image. Behind it, the sedan. And behind the sedan, in the far distance, the faintest flicker of something else. A figure? A person standing in the middle of the road? Or maybe it was just a glitch. A distortion. My eyes have been playing tricks for days. Still, I uploaded the video. Not all of it. Just a few clips. Just enough to prove I wasn't imagining things. No commentary. No desperate plea. Just a post on a local forum for unexplained sightings. A quiet corner of the internet where people traded stories about strange lights and missing time. I didn't expect much. A few comments, maybe some wild theories. Probably someone mocking me. That would have been fine. Normal even. Instead, I got a private message. No profile picture. No username I recognized. Just a string of numbers and dashes. The message was short. You're not being followed. You're being led. I stared at the screen for a long time, rereading the message again and again. The words burrowed under my skin. Not being followed. Being led. The difference was subtle, but terrifying. It meant that every turn I made to escape, every attempt to lose the car, every red light, every detour, none of it had mattered. It was never about the car staying with me. It was about me ending up where it wanted. That night, I left the dash cam running while the car was parked. The red indicator light blinked steadily. I checked the footage before bed. Nothing. I checked it again in the morning. Still nothing. But just before I stepped out to leave, I opened the door and glanced inside, a habit I developed. The interior was cold. Still, untouched, except for one thing. The rearview mirror had been adjusted, tilted just slightly, just enough to shift the angle. Now, when I sat in the driver's seat, the mirror no longer showed my back window. It showed the middle of the back seat, perfectly centered. The sky was still bruised with morning when I left the driveway, fog bleeding across the asphalt like a slow tide. The air carried a weight to it, heavy with silence, as if even the birds didn't want to interrupt what was coming. I hadn't slept, hadn't even tried. Something had shifted, a pull deep beneath my ribs, wordless but insistent, urging me back onto the road. So I listened. I retraced the exact path I'd taken that first night. The same turns, the same long stretches of forgotten highway. I didn't rely on my GPS, didn't need to. The way was seared in my bones now. Each street I turned on and tugged at something quiet in the back of my mind, like an itch I couldn't reach. It wasn't just familiarity. It was recognition. Places I shouldn't have known, but did. The side road I'd use to try and lose the car. It felt like I'd driven it long ago, as someone else. The pothole near the corner, the broken sign hanging from rusted hinges, the way the trees bent over the pavement like archways. All of it rang with a strange, pulsing clarity. Not memories, not exactly. More like echoes. Like scenes from a dream I'd forgotten until now. It only got worse as I drove. Each turn brought more flashes, split-second images that didn't belong to any moment I could place. A red scarf flapping in the wind. A dashboard cracked down the middle. The smell of cigarettes and cherry gum. I could feel my hands gripping the wheel too tightly, knuckles white, as the boundary between then and now thinned. I passed an old motel that hadn't seen guests in years. Its vacancy sign still flickered uselessly in the daylight. Something about it sent a spike of heat up my spine. I had never stayed there, but I had. I could almost feel the key in my hand, its tag a faded red plastic oval with a white 9 stamped on it. I could see myself standing at the window, watching headlights roll by in the dark. It was like walking through someone else's memories, but that someone wore my face. By the time I made it home, the fog had burned away, but the feeling hadn't. My skin felt stretched too tight, like I'd been breathing someone else's air. I sat in the car for a long time before going inside, trying to convince myself that this was all stress, that I was imagining connections where none existed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the car hadn't just been following me that night. It had been guiding me. That evening, I called my mother. I didn't plan to confront her. I didn't have a script. But as soon as I heard her voice, something inside me frayed. I asked her about Carl. Again, this time, I didn't back down when she evaded. Her tone stayed calm, but the cracks showed. She denied everything. Said the past was behind us. Said some things were better left buried. But I didn't agree. That night, I drove to her house. I knew she wouldn't answer the door. Not after our last conversation. But I still had a key. She wasn't home. Or maybe she was just hiding behind the curtains, holding her breath while I stepped quietly across the floorboards of the place I'd grown up in. The attic hatch was still in the hallway ceiling. Same squeaky hinges. Same rickety pull-down ladder. I climbed carefully, the air above dry and laced with dust that hadn't moved in years. It smelled like old paper and insulation. Like secrets. The boxes were stacked neatly, labeled in her tidy handwriting. Christmas. Baby clothes. High school. But one sat at the very back, unlabeled. Its cardboard edges were soft with age, corners buckled like it had been opened and reclosed too many times. Inside were layers of yellowed newspaper clippings, photographs, and brittle envelopes. The headlines jumped out first. Local man dies in fiery wreck. Crash on Hill Creek Road leaves one dead. Police rule out foul play in fatal collision. Each article mentioned the same name, Carl Reeves. Some clippings were just columns, others full pages with black and white images. One photo showed the crumpled remains of the black sedan, almost unrecognizable, twisted metal like a carcass peeled open. Another showed him, a mugshot maybe, or a press photo from earlier days. Lean face, messy hair, a crooked grin that didn't reach his eyes. And one more photo, not from a newspaper, an old Polaroid folded once down the middle. Two people stood in front of a gas station, smiles wide, arms around each other. The man was unmistakable. Carl, younger alive. And beside him, a woman. It wasn't my mother, but was... Her face wasn't identical. There were differences. Softer cheeks, lighter eyes, hair in a shorter cut. But there was no mistaking it. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror. She looked like me, too much like me. A cousin maybe, a sister, a version of me from another life. The resemblance made my stomach clench. At the bottom of the box, tucked between two folded articles, was a small piece of notepad paper, torn at the edge. The handwriting was my mother's. Slanted, hurried, almost angry. He wouldn't stop following me. I had to make him disappear. The note was dated, a week before the crash. I sat on the floor of the attic for what felt like hours, the weight of it all settling into my bones. The realization formed slowly, painfully, each detail clicking into place like the tumblers in a locked door. Carl hadn't disappeared. He died, but not in the way I'd been told. My mother had hidden the truth, and now it was clawing its way back. Not just through memory, not just through dreams, through steel and rust and chrome. Through the black car that moved when it shouldn't. Through the eyes I saw in the mirror that weren't mine. Maybe Carl had never left. Maybe he was never meant to. And maybe, just maybe, his unfinished story didn't end with her. It ended with me. I didn't plan the drive. Not really. I just knew I had to go. By the time the sky bruised into twilight, something in me had settled. Calm, sharp-edged, inevitable. I'd stopped running from it. The fear hadn't gone, but had changed. It wasn't about escape anymore. It was about answers. Or maybe just surrender. So I got in a car. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. It would be there. It always was. I drove the same route I'd taken that first night, but somewhere along the way, instinct pulled me left at an unmarked fork I didn't recognize. The turn wasn't planned, but it felt familiar in a way that made my skin tighten. The road narrowed, broken by roots and time, and the trees pressed in from both sides like a funnel guiding me deeper. There were no signs, no houses, no lights, only fog and asphalt slowly giving way to gravel. The deeper I went, the less the world made sense. My GPS froze. The temperature on the dashboard blinked. Even the air felt different, thick and too still, like it had forgotten how to move. Eventually, the road just ended. There was no barrier, no warning. It simply ran out, swallowed by a clearing beyond a collapsed fence. A rusted sign leaned against a post, its letters long eroded to nothing. But I knew what it was. A junkyard. I stepped out of the car, and the silence hit like a wall. No bits, no crickets, no engine hum, just the dry crunch of my boots on dead leaves and gravel. The place was choked with metal corpses, cars stripped to skeletons, truck beds filled with rainwater and rust. The ground sloped downward toward the back of the lot, where a warped awning caved in over a row of forgotten wrecks. And beneath it, hidden in shadow like it had always been there, was the car. The black sedan. I don't know how I recognized it. The paint had blistered away, exposing veins of corroded steel. Moss climbed the tires. The windows were cloudy with grime, but the shape, the size, the angle of the windshield, it was exact. And the license plate, though faded, still showed the same sequence burned into my memory. The passenger side door was streaked with something dark, flaked and brittle. It looked like blood, old, cracked like dried riverbeds. And on the inside of the windows, scratches. Long, uneven, desperate scratches, trailing in every direction. Something had tried to claw its way out. Or in. I reached for the door handle, but the moment I touched the metal, a low vibration hummed through my fingertips. I pulled back. The air around me felt wrong. Heavy, like the atmosphere was holding its breath. Behind me, my car engine was still running. I hadn't turned it off. I spun around and walked quickly back toward it, trying the key in the ignition. It wouldn't turn. Stuck. Locked, as if something had frozen the system in place. My phone was dead. I charged it before I left, but now the screen was black cold. Nothing responded. Everything around me was still. Not just quiet, still. Like time had stopped, and I wasn't alone. I turned back to the black sedan. On the passenger seat, barely visible through the murky glass, something waited. I stepped closer. A yellowed envelope lay curled against the cracked leather, water-stained and fragile with age. I reached through the shattered driver's window and pulled it free. Inside, a photograph. It was old, colors washed out, the edges curled inward. But the image was clear enough. Two people sat inside the black sedan. The woman in the passenger seat was young, maybe early 20s. Her face turned slightly toward the camera, a small smile on her lips. I recognized her immediately. My mother. But the man behind the wheel wasn't Carl Reeves. He was heavier, older. His smile was too wide, and his posture too relaxed. His hand rested casually on the wheel, and his wrist was adorned with a gold watch, thick, gaudy, and unmistakable. I'd seen that watch before. Not on a wrist. Dangling. Swinging gently in my rearview mirror on that first night. Catching the light, even though there had been no light to catch. But my car didn't have a watch. I never hung anything from the mirror. I dropped the photo. The air shifted again. Not a breeze. Not a sound. Just a tightening. Like something had noticed me. I backed away, careful not to turn my back completely. The gravel crunched louder than it should have underfoot. My breath scraped in my throat. I got in my car and slammed the door. The key now turned with no resistance. The engine rumbled to life. I didn't look back at the junkyard. Not at the wreck. Not at the place where I knew the truth had been waiting all this time. I drove. Fast. Straight. And when I reached my house, everything felt too normal again. The wind was back. The world had re-stitched itself, but I could still feel the loose thread dangling behind me. Inside, the house was quiet. My hand shook as I turned on the lights. I didn't bother taking off my coat. That's when I saw it. The landline on the kitchen wall, blinking. One new message. The timestamp said it came through 2 hours ago, before I'd even left. I pressed play. The message started with static, then a voice, low, unfamiliar, steady. It told me I didn't know the full story. Said I should stay off the roads tonight. Then the sound of tires on gravel. And finally, just before the line went dead, another voice. Not whispered, not loud, just there like someone was standing directly behind me, breathing. 3 words, soft and certain. Passengers waiting.